Our story begins with a mysterious question from the system. Do you know how this world will end? The system offers the user a choice of yes or no, as the digital page, clean as fresh snow, gently settles onto the stone floor. Next, we find ourselves in a dungeon where a secret meeting of the tribe is taking place, led by their king. One figure bows his head in front of a majestic throne guarded by orcs. The king of the dungeon swings his leg over his leg with a casual grace as he sits on his throne of power. In his hand he holds a daisy, the petals of which he deliberately tears off one by one. The demon who took over the dungeon had only good intentions. He came to this world to take the first step toward change, slowly picking off the daisy petals. Against the backdrop of burning buildings, his demonic throne stands motionless, with a girl kneeling before him. People gathered in awe to witness this performance, holding their breath as the girl began to speak. She was visibly nervous, feeling fearful, and stammering. She said, "Thank you, Bishop Dantalus." Drops of sweat dripped down her forehead like tears hitting the stone pavement as she bowed before the bishop. With humble courage, she shares her knowledge of the existence of 6 other cities besides theirs that were last free, noting that it would take a lot of time and resources for the bishop to conquer them. The girl's words upset the bishop a bit, and the realization of the enormous effort required to suppress these cities becomes apparent. She introduces herself as Christina, a noblewoman with considerable influence in the empire, assuring him that she can ensure the city's surrender without bloodshed, showing confidence in her words. The bishop, unperturbed, continues to tear off the daisy petals, deciding to give Christina a chance to prove her worth. Christina's face lights up with the realization that her words have made an impression on the bishop. She is already plotting how to convince him of her intentions. Standing up with dignity, she asks the bishop for permission to mediate in negotiations with other cities. But when the last petal of the daisy falls, the bishop warns her, suspecting her of possible betrayal. His words about the betrayal of her entire people deeply upset the girl. The bishop does not back down, continuing to look her straight in the eye and expose her true intentions, which, in his opinion, are precisely treason. Feeling the weight of the bishop's words, the girl was panicked and wanted to retract her words, hoping that everything would turn out to be a mistake. But it was too late. The orcs immediately grabbed her arms, and the bishop coldly said that if her intention was to save her own skin, it was her fatal mistake, because she should have been thinking about saving her people. "Isn't that true?" he asked the crowd, which was watching with intense attention and holding its breath. Standing up, the bishop asked the people if they had heard the words of their so-called leader. He claimed that their leader had said that their lives, their safety, even their children, were valued less than Christina's life, which deeply disturbed the crowd. The Lord continued his speech, emphasizing whether they could really entrust their city to such an unworthy leader. He called on the people to respond to this situation, while Christina listened to his words, terrified. The bishop raised his hand and assured the people that this person did not deserve their trust. "She cannot be your leader," he said loudly, addressing everyone present. He declared that he would personally be at the forefront of the fight against this hypocritical woman who thought only of herself, and promised that there were many such people in their world, and he would find each and every one of them. The people listened to his words in awe, some even crying, deeply moved by his speech. His speech radiated determination and purpose, and he called for the eradication of all this corruption, inviting people to stand side by side with him in the struggle. The people enthusiastically raised their hands and shouted his name, Dantalus, showing their support and willingness to stand by his side. Surrounded by orcs, the girl with her hands in chains is led to the place of her punishment. In a fit of horror, she realizes that she has been brought to the guillotine, where a huge blade can end her life. With tears in her eyes, she begs the bishop to reconsider his decision and stop the execution, claiming that she meant no harm. But it was too late. The orc lifts her up by her hair, showing the girl's face to the crowd, which bursts into applause, supporting the decision of its leader. The ruler drops the daisy on the ground, rises from the throne and tramples the flower, showing his disdain for the previous symbol of his thoughts. He looks around the crowd with satisfaction, realizing that among the 72 demon lords ruling the demon world, Dantalus is only 71st. But this is only the beginning of a great strategy and a fascinating story. In a deep, dark dungeon, with water dripping from the ceiling, our hero sits there, uttering curses, one after another, without stopping swearing. He sits there, exhausted and bloody, asking himself how it happened that he ended up in this state, having lost all his strength. The story begins with his deep hatred for his father. He never liked his father, and he always dreamed of his death. And then the day comes when the father really dies, and the son stands in a suit by the urn with his father's ashes. He is looking at his father's portrait, thinking about his life. His father died of a heart attack. He was never a good person, always living a life of gangsterism. His father didn't live with his mother. He was used to women's attention and took advantage of their frivolity. He was also greedy and never shared his money. He did not raise his son and was never present in his life, which was always a painful problem for the boy. However, after his father's death, the boy did one good thing. He cleaned the house, throwing away all the unnecessary things. He thought that maybe his father had a premonition of his death. But as he made himself a cup of coffee, he came to the conclusion that he didn't care about these thoughts. He stuck to his opinion, considering such considerations insignificant and focusing on other things. The morning light came through the window, illuminating the room. From the window he watched people in suits hurrying to work, which to him was synonymous with hell, and he was enjoying the moment, drinking his morning coffee. He clenched his fist, feeling like a winner in the lottery of life. He called himself a neat person who does not study, work, or do business. Who would have guessed that his old father had a secret that made him happy? There was 50 million yen in the basement, equivalent to $3.5 million as of 2024. Lying on the couch, he realized that at the end of his life, his father was still a good father. Having left him this amount of money, the boy could afford anything he wanted, whether it was a house or a car. Everything was within his reach. He could even buy the hearts of girls, but money opened up endless possibilities for him. But the guy was not interested in all this material stuff. He had other ambitions. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door, and he jumped out of bed, his eyes lit up with curiosity. Opening the door, he saw a postman bringing him an order. The boy quickly took the package and ran to his room, leaving the postman with a thank you for choosing their service. He flew to his room as if on wings. He realized that now that he had enough money, he could afford to pay for his bedroom dream, which had cost him over 30 million yen. He made 3 promises to himself: never to work, never to have friends, and never to get married. For him, working was the epitome of horror, a huge part of unhappiness. Having friends meant being immersed in their constant problems, listening to boring stories about work and daily life, which he absolutely wanted to avoid. Marriage for him meant spending half of his life on something as uncertain and burdensome as love. He recalled his father, who had married no less than 12 times and had numerous children, which only disgusted him. He was determined not to repeat his father's mistakes and live by his own rules. His real desire was to play his favorite games in peace, which was the epitome of luxury and a kind of paradise for him. Finally, he had the opportunity to fulfill his dream, to play games, equipping himself with everything he needed, from game tapes to a large TV. And just like that, 2 months passed without him noticing. He held the gamepad in his hands, combing his overgrown head, realizing that his dungeon attack was finally ready. It had taken him a long time, and there were piles of trash around his bed, evidence that he hadn't left his room. Now he was choosing what to play next, looking at VR games. The sudden annoying sound of a notification distracted him, and he hadn't received one in a long time. A new message notification appeared on the big screen. The guy was surprised to receive this notification, because he did not expect anything like this. But who could have written to him if he didn't answer questions or accept friend requests? When he opened the message, he saw that it was from the game's developers, who expressed their gratitude for completing the dungeons. It was nice, but at the same time, he realized that a lot of time and effort had gone into developing the game. He took the thanks indifferently, thinking about how many office workers had devoted themselves to creating games, and recognized their efforts as a successful business because they had been able to convince him to buy many of their products. However, the message mentioned a server-based game, which piqued his interest. He began to wonder what this server game was. Clicking on the link, the system offered to choose between a beautiful and a serious girl, which seemed absurd to him. These previous questions seemed like complete nonsense to him. He decided it didn't matter and chose one of them. The next question was even stranger, whether he enjoyed being beaten or hitting someone. The questions seemed strange to him, but he continued to take the quiz. He noticed that the questions seemed to have no end. This quiz seemed completely pointless to him. He got nervous and wished the quiz would finally end. And the last question from the system: do you know how this world will end? In the hero's opinion, this was the most absurd question he had ever heard. Reflecting on it, he realizes that in fact he has completed this worthless game and has a rough idea of its end. The next question challenged him. Could he change this ending? This question sounded so strange that it gave him chills. He was tired of endless questions that had no meaning for him. The messages seemed made up, and the next question about the amount of money made him indignant, forcing him to throw the gamepad away. He lost his trust in this cursed world, glad he hadn't succumbed to its temptations. But when he looked around, he saw a real mess in his room, and a big cockroach. The cockroach terrified the boy. He looked at the cockroach with disgust, shouting about the inadmissibility of such guests. Wanting to kill the cockroach, he accidentally pressed a button on his gamepad, and thus confirmed his readiness to change the ending of the game. At that moment, the monitor turned red. The room was filled with blinding red light that seemed endless. He closed his eyes from the bright rays, not understanding why they were so blinding. Suddenly, everything went quiet. The guy disappeared, the screen turned off, and only the garbage and his computer remained in the room. Our hero, dumbfounded, watches his new image, wondering, what the hell is going on here? How could this even happen? He looks at his hands in amazement, unable to believe that they belong to him, that he can control them and feel everything as if in real life. Suddenly, his red eyes instinctively pick up a signal of danger. One of the treasure hunters calls out to him sharply. "Get up and tell us where the treasure is!" He warns, if you don't, the consequences will be much worse. Calling him a demon lord, the hunters terrify the boy. In despair, he realizes that his life is beginning. A new trial in a terrifying world where he is beaten by treasure hunters and lies in a dungeon, unable to say a word. Although these hands did not seem to be his own, and the body didn't feel like his own, the pain was so real that it left no doubt about the authenticity of what was happening. A sudden, piercing pain gripped his body. He is suddenly grabbed by a stiff pain in his stomach, leaving him in despair with no idea what to do next. The treasure hunters, armed to the teeth, approach him. One of them ominously demands, "Go ahead, spit on the ground, you'll regret it. For the last time, where are the treasures?" one of the hunters says with a malicious smile, escalating the tension. The boy, in shock, helplessly watches what is happening around him, unable to understand the situation. One of the hunters emphasizes the alternative. If he does not tell where the treasure is, the pain will become indescribably more acute. By addressing him as Mr. Demon Lord, the hunters add to the mystique of the situation, hinting at what he has become in this world. Suffering from pain on his knees in front of them, the boy laughs ironically. "What treasures? What demon lord? What are you talking about?" He looks around, trying to figure out where he is. A place lit by candles, decorated with marble statues of demons and cold earthen passages. A crowd of armed men surrounds him, demanding the treasure, while he grimaces in pain and has absolutely no idea what is being asked of him. After focusing on himself for a moment, his eyes flash with red energy. He can barely breathe after the blows he has received, blood flowing from his mouth. It reminds him of a video game he was playing before he came here through an anomaly on his device's screen, though he can't realize it. Given the events, he loses track of how to act in this situation. His body is full of indescribable pain, and his leg is so damaged that he can't even run. What the hell is going on here? He thinks, feeling incredible pain and losing his mind from the unfolding events. The situation was far from being in his favor, and although his hands were shaking, he realized he needed to calm down and collect his thoughts. He knows that in stressful situations, it is important to make your brain work as best it can to find a way to avoid a confrontation with these thugs. Turning to them, he says, "Wait." Offering the treasure hunters clues by talking to him, the first thing he asks is, "Why do you call me the Demon Lord?" Suddenly, one of the hunters grabs him by the demon horns that suddenly stood out on his head. Pulling him by the horn, the hunter ironically asks if he has lost his mind from the blows he has received. Looking into his eyes and seeing the tears, the hunter starts laughing out loud, calling him a crying demon horn, Dantalion. And then suddenly, after these words, the boy's memories come back. They remind him of an RPG game where heroes travel the world to defeat demonic gods. The essence of the game was to save the world by fighting against numerous demon lords. The developers made the game incredibly difficult, where the player dies over and over again, and the story is so depressing that its only possible ending is the collapse of the world. Every day, our hero immersed himself in this game, winning every time, rapidly making his way through the trials. However, his playable character, one of 72 demon kings, was ranked 71st in the rankings, making him one of the weakest demon rulers in the game's universe. This particular Dantalion was easily defeated, and the game remained unfinished. He was easy prey for the players, the first enemy on their way, which made them wonder if he was here because of some kind of system glitch caused by an accidental button press due to a damn cockroach. There was no doubt that that bright flash of light was what had transported him to this reality, to the body of Dantalion, the Demon Lord. The question arises, how could this have become a reality? He comes to the conclusion that there is no logical explanation for this event, but whatever the case, he found himself in this critical situation, which was far from ideal. As he remained silent, he soon felt the treasure hunter preparing to punch him in the face. The blow was so powerful that it knocked Dantalion back several meters. He slid across the cold ground, kicking his legs into the air, and landed on his back. Stopping, he thought to himself, "My God, how much longer can this go on? How can I get back?" The treasure hunter laughs at him with undisguised pleasure, proclaiming that this is all just for his amusement. The other men behind him join in the mockery, laughing out loud. At this critical moment, Dantalion decides to gather his will and try to rectify his situation. But instead he faces a brutal beating. A fist hits him hard in the face. The men continue to beat him, using their legs and arms, causing serious injuries. During this ferocious beating, the boy thinks about the absurdity of the situation after he had finally freed himself from his father's tyranny and hoped for a free life. He dreamed of a peaceful and comfortable existence, but instead he was ruthlessly beaten by several men, which was far from his idea of comfort. Finding himself on the verge of death in this gloomy dungeon, he realizes the absurdity of the situation, feeling himself starting to lose consciousness. Suddenly, his consciousness moves to a white room where an unknown figure sits in the center at a desk, whose face is not visible at first glance. As he tries to get a better look, he is horrified to realize that it is his own father, the man who has caused him many of his troubles. When he finds himself in front of his father, he cannot understand why he is in front of him, and what makes his father laugh at such a moment. He thought that he had already suffered enough in his past life, but suddenly memories of an event that happened shortly before that pop into his mind. He remembers a minibus speeding down the road, which had previously been stolen by a man who had a grudge against his father. This was not the first such event. The kidnapping was repeated about 4 times. The kidnapper, looking at the boy in the rearview mirror, notes his unusual calmness for a kidnapped person. The boy, sitting in the back seat tied up with a strong rope, remained calm despite the situation. But this time he decided to accept his fate, letting the events unfold on their own, and calm down internally. The kidnapper took him far outside the city to a certain house. In the garage of this house, the kidnapper put him on a chair, tied him up, and stood in front of him, watching him. As he approaches, the man warns him that if he makes any movement, he will kill him, putting a gun to his head. At this critical moment, the boy makes an internal decision to do whatever it takes to get rid of his despicable father. When the gun is at his temple, he tells the kidnapper, "Shoot." The boy's attitude toward death, his willingness to accept the end, seriously worried the man with the gun. It's not every day that you hear a young man demanding action from you with such courage. Without hesitation, the boy tries to pull the trigger himself, deciding to help the bandit in his indecision. He convinces himself that if the gun turns out to be fake, he will lose. But if it is real, he will win. Freeing himself from the burden of the past, the boy waits with cold calm for the decisive moment, imagining how the bullet will hit him directly in the head, which should have freed him from his despotic father. However, the bandit, extremely confused by the boy's determination, loses control and falls to the ground, realizing that he is unable to shoot the child. Eventually, the police detain the kidnapper, who feels defeated in this bet on his life. At this point, the boy begins to realize an important lesson. Anyone who stands up to the end has extraordinary endurance and strength of mind. Being in the body of a demon lord in such a difficult situation, this thought flashed through his mind when the kidnappers, standing in front of him, gave him one last chance to reveal where the treasure was. They were coming closer and closer, straining the atmosphere to the limit. Under the incessant kicking, demanding to reveal his secret, the guy finds the strength to pull himself together. He realizes that he has already had the experience of dying on this day, which gives him a certain determination. Realizing that fate has challenged him, he decides that he has the right to control events according to his own scenario. The kidnappers, tired of the continuous beating, ask him again if he will reveal the location of the treasure, if he is ready to go to hell. They warn that their patience has limits, putting him under constant psychological pressure. One of them, a large man with a hammer on his shoulder, gives him an ultimatum, asking if he wants to die before they find out about the treasure. As the patience of all the participants in this drama wears thin, one of them shouts that no matter what he says, they will find the treasure anyway, so the only thing left for him is death. A bald man with a huge hammer in his hands is preparing to end this scene, intending to send the hero to eternity. But the boy holds his hand out saying, "Wait a minute," instantly stopping the attack. The man with the hammer freezes in place, stopped just before he strikes. With intense interest, those around him wait for his words, wondering what he will say this time. The guy thinks for a moment, but declares with determination that he will do it. Rising despite the pain in his arm, he stands up, making a promise to himself. Regardless of the circumstances, his goal is to survive. A lot of time has passed since he was freed from his tyrannical father's rule. Finally, he begins to feel truly free, enjoying his favorite pastime. But suddenly, quite unexpectedly, fate has a surprise for him, and he inadvertently causes the game's continuation to activate, which sucks him right back into his world. He is surprised to realize that he has been transported to the very heart of the game, finding himself in the epicenter of a dangerous scenario in this terrifying world. And what's even more exciting, he finds himself in the body of an unfortunate demon lord who has been chosen as his abode. Now he faces adventurers ready for new challenges and trials. He was on the verge of death, as the treasure hunters were ready to kill him without hesitation. So he decided to get out of the dangerous situation by any means necessary. When he appeared in front of the adventurers, he thought it was just a joke. But having gained true freedom, life brought him a new challenge. He told the treasure hunters that he understood them and would point out the location of the treasure. His eyes shone with a demonic light, and he decided to take control of the situation using his own strategy. He made a promise to himself to survive at all costs. The bald and healthy treasure hunter laughed as he admitted that he had finally given up. He rejoiced at the thought that if their team quickly found the treasure and brought the Lord's head to their boss, it would be a celebration for them. The Lord realized that he didn't really know where the treasure was, and if he pointed a random place in their direction, they are ready to kill him right away, and his survival instinct tells him that he needs to stall for time to decide how to proceed. Our hero was completely defeated. He decided to do everything he could to survive and told the treasure hunters that the treasure was in the temple of the demon lord. We see his appearance. The team of treasure hunters listened attentively to the boy who warned them that the treasure was hidden behind a magic shield. They have the only chance to find them, to take him with them, leaving him alive. I looked into their eyes and asked what they would say to that. Suddenly, however, someone tried to hit him, which worried him. One gold digger swung his sword so fast that our hero thought he was dead. The hunter stuck the sword next to his head into the ground, demonstrating his strength. He warned him that if it turned out that he was lying, he would be killed immediately after this discovery. They accepted his offer, giving our hero more time to develop a strategy to solve the difficult situation. The hunters laughed, saying to each other, "Do you really believe that the treasure is in the demon lord's chamber?" Nevertheless, they agreed to follow the rascal. The demon lord led them to his chamber to show them the treasure he had mentioned, but he did not know exactly where it was. He was wondering how to overcome the first obstacle on the way to his liberation. It was like a real battle that had begun right now. They could not kill him here now. They have to get to the demon lord's chamber through the cold dungeons. He has time to think. What will he do next? How will he get out of this situation? As the hunters walked through the dungeon, they noticed the lord's slow pace and decided to speed up his walk. One of the hunters said that if he is stopped from hunting, he feels alive and can kill at any time. However, the demon lord apologized and continued on. He realized that he had to kill them before they could kill him. How could he do that when there were 10 armed men against him? He was looking for something to defeat his enemies, looked around and saw that this was the castle of the Day of the Talion. Our hero realized that there must be at least one monster hiding here. The leader of the hunters was pushing the Dentillion, ordering it to move faster. One of the hunters promised to kill him as soon as they found the treasure. The Lord, having passed through the dungeon and noticed the remains of the monsters, realized that they were not fresh, because there were only bones. He cannot rely on others. He has to do it himself. The monsters will not help him. If the game has become a reality, he can use the Lord's abilities. He realizes that this is his chance to survive in a difficult situation. He disables the eyes of Zeus. He perceived the game as a reality and was ready to take advantage of it. The Zeus dashboard appeared in front of him, where he saw a detailed layout of his map and all the categories to pay attention to. He realizes that this is his advantage over others, which makes him feel a strong desire to live and excitement. This gambling skill can change the course of events. Eyes of Zeus is a skill in the game Dungeon Defense named after Zeus. You can see the last defensive position of your items in the inventory and various traps in the dungeon using this skill, which is usually used at the beginning of the middle of the game. The location he is in can use this at the beginning of the game. This was the first instruction in the dungeon of Dentalion Castle, which helped travelers to understand the game and its mechanisms faster. He was interested in why he was here, but he didn't see the point in this way. But he didn't give up, no matter what, and he found it. On these roads on the first level there are no corpses at all. The Lord wondered what the bright light that had illuminated his eyes could be. The system reported that there were no soldiers in the Demon Lord's castle, and it was dangerous. So the player needed to hire soldiers. The guy choked on this information. The system gave him the opportunity to choose monsters to hire, providing 100 game Librons for this purpose. This is a skill of Demon Lords that allows them to hire monsters. But there was one limitation to these skills. The cost, he could only afford a hireling for 100 Librons. He wondered why the Lord had so little money and what he did in life. He thought for a moment because there were 10 hunters, and he could only hire 10 goblins, so it would be difficult for 7 goblins to defeat them. He should hire golems and launch a surprise attack, which would ensure his victory and allow him to handle the situation with dignity. Having developed this tactic, he carefully thought through each step based on his influential position. Our hero continued to analyze the map, connect the facts, and eventually came to a conclusion. What if he acts on his plan? His chance of success is 60%, which is much higher than the risk of death. Looking around, he realized that he had little time to think. He has to take this chance. He has no other choice. He clenches his fist, composing himself. He mentally prepares himself for the confrontation. If his plan is successful, he will gain their trust. This is the first thing he needs to know. The Apostle Aphrodite says a spell, standing behind the hunters. He can see their race names, levels, skills, and characteristics above their heads. Apostle and Aphrodite is a tool that allows you to view statuses. He can identify all the enemy's weaknesses with this information. At first, he perceived it as the end. He was delighted with the newly discovered capability. The hunter noticed that he was walking too slowly, which worried him. He shouted that he was not worthy and demanded that he walk faster, pointing his sword at him. The Lord apologizes and asks for forgiveness, trying to hurry. The hunter starts laughing, baring his teeth. He points his sword at him and orders his men to pay attention. Our hero launched a counterattack. He read all the steps in advance. Everything is ready to hire monsters. The first step to success is to gain their trust. His fiery eyes signal the start of the counterattack. The apostrophe and Aphrodite attack is a high-ranked skill that can be used in dungeons in the dungeon attack game. It was mentioned in the text that detailed statuses and descriptions of other players are rare and difficult to find without a thorough search. Our protagonist knows everything about his opponents, having familiarized himself with their cards, skills, and weaknesses. The hunter asked the Lord to go faster and not to annoy him. Our hero agreed to everything and endured the abuse. He was aware of his status and the trait that made him the leader of the scoundrels. If you take a big risk, the state was in a difficult situation because of its left hand, which did not work. He would overcome them with the strength of a lord. They passed through the dungeon arches that symbolized the entrance to the Lord's residence. The group of people moved confidently toward the state where the Lord was held hostage, lighting the way with only one torch. The Lord looked around and saw the skeletons of warriors who had never reached their goal. He realized that it was time to start at this point. The Lord calls on everyone to stop and listen to him. The hunters suddenly reacted to the message and paid attention to it. They asked what it meant. He apologizes to them and warns them that there is a trap ahead to gain their trust. He points his finger and shows everyone the trap. However, the hunters didn't take his word seriously because they didn't see any evidence. The Lord asked them to come forward. He warned them that if any of them tried to speak up, he would shoot them in the head with an arrow without any warning, and they would not even be able to turn back. The Lord demonstrates the process by his own example. He limps defiantly, trying to prove his point. One of the hunters shouted, "Just now!" stopping him. The partner said that from now on the path would become darker and more difficult to recognize people. The demon lord disappeared from their radar. They yelled at him to stop, but he kept going. The hunter shouted that running away would not save him. The Lord kept walking, rejecting objections, so that he doesn't worry that he won't be able to run away because he can't feel his leg. This is also an opportunity to show his respect for them. These guys were different from other adventurers because they didn't want to kill him right away. If they doubted his words, they could follow him, even though he could not provide them with complete safety. The hunters were worried by his words and thought he was trying to scare them. They almost killed their boss, which made him very angry, and now he can punish them for it. The partner asked the boss to stop and think before going any further. If they make a mistake, these traps can stop them or kill them. A huge stone on chains suddenly fell from the sky, almost hitting one of the hunters. The man, frightened, managed to dodge. The devil expresses surprise, asking the hunters if they really can't realize that this is all a trick of the Lord. "This rascal intends to escape from us," says the hunter's boss. The Lord stealthily moved away from the hunters into the darkness to carry out his plan. After checking that no one was watching him, he entered the cold dungeon. He was offended because he had gone too far. Behind him were 2 arrows he had found on the way. He thought of a plan to use them and create confusion. Realizing that the uncertainty of the future compelled him to take them with him, he kept them ready. This is where reality sets in, and he squeezes the arrows hard in his hand. He gritted his teeth and said it was nothing to him. He lifted the arrow with both hands, preparing to plunge it into himself. After a minute, the hunters, who did not understand what was happening, remained motionless, waiting for the Lord to leave. They heard a scream. Perhaps it was Lord Denthalian's voice. The hunter wonders what the hell is going on. A quiet voice comes from the cave, asking why they aren't leaving yet. The henchman asks his boss what to do next, but the latter is in a daze and doesn't know what to do. Poacher warns, "Get ready, guys. If we relax, we'll die right here." The treasure hunters were a little worried about whether this was the best place to turn in. With trembling legs, they moved forward. They searched for the Dentalian, calling out to him. They noticed a pool of blood as they walked further. They realized that someone had left behind a pool of blood and footprints. They lit their way with fire torches and continued on until they found the wounded Dentalian lying covered in blood. They saw that something was sticking out of his leg and asked Denthalian what had happened. He moaned in pain. It was foolish of him to go on. The hunter asks if there really was a betrayal and if he was trapped. They feel that he is being untruthful. No one asks if it's true that he was easily trapped despite his condition. The hunters stood behind the boss, looked at each other, and thought that anything was possible. Zakidnik continued the conversation, asking the accused, "Why don't you help us? You can't put yourself in harm's way." Our hero holds his hand over his heart and repeats what he said earlier. "You guys are not like ordinary treasure hunters. You didn't treat me like an enemy. You didn't try to get rid of me. You saved my life." He will do everything to help them move forward. The Lord noted that he had missed an arrow while saving them and defiantly pulled it out of his leg, saying it was no big deal. He held the arrow in his hands and showed it to everyone, saying that they should move forward regardless of the circumstances. The hunters could not understand whether he was serious. The Lord impressed the hunters with his confidence in his statements. The system reported that the traveler's confidence in the Dentillion had increased by 5 points. Dentillion noticed that the trust of these scoundrels in him had increased. He was shocked to the core that everything had happened exactly as he had planned. The nearby hunters raised the hero's level of respect and score by 15 points. The Lord watched as their trust in him grew right before his eyes, realizing that he had waited for this great moment. This was not enough for the success of his strategy and the implementation of his plan of retribution. He urged them not to delay and to act immediately. His strategy increased the attractiveness of the Dentallion and its quality in the game. He noticed that the strategy was effective and the first attempt could almost save his life. He stands up on one leg, saying that he has to keep going. The hunter said that he was not sure what he had in mind, but he was ready to apply himself to achieve a common goal. They noticed his feet were too slow, so they realized they had no choice. The boss ordered his subordinates to help the Lord get to the treasure. One of the hunters took him on his shoulder and said, "Let's go." The Lord looked him in the eye, said thank you gratefully, and realized that everything was going according to plan. The hunters were amazed and approved of his decision to protect them. However, the guys had to move forward and always be vigilant. The Lord realized that everything was going according to plan and everything was fine. Their boss, although known for his firmness, eventually gave up. It is necessary to continue, because it is not enough. The Lord begins a new act to better manipulate the hunters who need more. They reach the entrance to the temple, which was the demonic Lord's temple that the boys had originally planned to come to. The entrance was impressive and surpassed the imagination of the hunters, who were amazed at its scale. They successfully opened the door. The hunters declared that they were finally here. They asked His Highness to point out the place where he had buried the treasure. Suddenly a teardrop fell to the floor. The Lord burst into tears, and his tears flowed like a river. The hunters are amazed that they do not understand what is happening. The story of why the Lord burst into tears. The Lord replied that he didn't mind that this was happening, because he was just thinking about his former friends and the family he had. The hunter smilingly asks the demon lord if he really had a family. He says yes, it happened a long time ago. There was a time when someone loved him. He stretches his hand forward. He sees ahead the ruined place that was once his family. In his memories, this ruined place appeared in perfect condition, guarded by goblins and orcs under the guidance of mages who stood guard. One day, a large army decided to attack and destroy everything he felt attached to. They suddenly appeared, so the Lord went to deal with them. The great army tried to kill the Lord by pointing swords and arrows at him. They pulled their crossbows to shoot at Luke. They shot him in the back, which alarmed the Lord, and he was powerless. He was resigned to death, but suddenly a huge orc appeared behind him. He turned to Lord Denthalion, which amazed the hero. The orc asked if he was okay, but at the same moment arrows hit him, protecting the Lord. The Lord was deeply moved by that moment, and he could not hold back his tears just like that day. His servant saved him from the next death by sacrificing himself. He ordered him to run away and leave him to run as fast as he could. The Lord sobbed in denial when asked what he was talking about. He said that if he wanted to escape, he would never forget the orc's heroic deed. The orc's blood was flying, and the scene radiated with his heroism. The orc defended his lord, taking numerous blows, and calmed him down with the words, "Don't worry about me. Please hurry, he will not last long. Death is coming." The act turned out to be heroic, saving the Lord's life. He burst into tears as memories overwhelmed him. How good it would be to go there to the countryside. He remembered the past, and his tears revealed his despair. He defeated the orc and shared his sad story about his heroic deed and how he survived in tragic circumstances. This orc not only died, but also defended the building, and then, remembering the past, told his story to the hunters. They were touched by the story told by the Lord, saddened to hear that the Lord's life continued because of the sacrifice of his ward, who laid down his own life for him. One of the hunters expresses the opinion that the demon lord, in his opinion, should have been worse than this. The Lord adds words to his stories. "Guys, I'm crying for my dead friend." One of the hunters noticed that the Dentillion did not look like an incarnation of evil. At this point, Dentallion realizes that he is beginning to trust these hunters. The level of trust in the man who told the touching story began to grow among all the hunters who heard it. One of the hunters thought about how this story affects their goal. He recalled his trainer's advice to be careful with the Lord, as he was skilled at deception and could not be trusted with his words or tears. The Lord noticed how the level of trust of the hunters in him increased by an impressive 20 points, which is beneficial to him. The leader of the group of treasure hunters believed that the words of the demon lord did not matter. All that mattered to them was whether he was useful to them. Denthalion addressed all those present. He admitted that they were the only ones who had touched his heart and brought him back to the time of his reign. He emphasized that they are different from those who killed his family. He promised that he was ready to die for them right away. Everything that was in the temple, including the treasures and the life of the Lord himself, was now in their hands, which made a great impression. The hunters were overjoyed, but they asked where the treasures were. The Lord confirmed that the treasures he had mentioned earlier were protected by magic. Denthalion emphasized that he was about to remove the curse from the treasures, so everyone had to move away from them. The treasure-hunting hunters did not see the trick in his words, and did as he said. After they were at a safe distance from the Lord, they asked if he could now begin to break the curse. That was enough, as the sheep fell for his trick, and he was glad that everything was going according to plan. Denthalion emphasized that their plan would work after a little bit of a departure. Our protagonist laughs, activates his magical abilities as a lord, and completes all his actions to survive. After assessing the situation and his status in the game, he realized that the real treasure was not in the castle, but left with the character Denthalion before his reincarnation. It was 100 librons. He realizes that this is enough for his plan to succeed. In the game Dungeon Attack, 1 libron is worth 15 silver coins. The system asks if he wants to spend 76 librons. The Lord considers the many ways he can spend items and money in the game. He decides to spend the money on the travelers so that the books will help them win. The Lord is satisfied that he has trapped 10 people by hiring monsters for librons. He raised his hand as if to cast a spell. According to the rules of this world, Lord Denthalion uses a spell of the 7th rank. The Lord declares that he rewards brave heroes in the name of Denthalion by giving them all his treasures. Everyone holds their breath, but nothing important happens. The boss of the hunters already thought they had been tricked. Everyone froze when they saw something unexpected. The Lord's spell worked unexpectedly for everyone. The coins fell to the floor, clinking against the stones. Hundreds of coins fell, pleasing the eyes of the treasure hunters. They looked at it amazed as if they had won the lottery. They imagined themselves incredibly rich, just like in their dreams. The satisfied boss of the hunters opened his mouth in pleasure. A rain of coins filled the room, filling the hunters' heads with dreams of wealth. They happily collected these coins, enjoying the moment. The boss realized that they were successful when he took a coin in his hand. His joy is growing by the minute. His face radiates joy and greed. The system told the Lord that the hunters' respect and love for him had increased by 50 points. Their boss exclaimed with delight that they had finally found the treasure. But this was no reason to delay. They had to quickly collect it and leave. He believed that he could still use the demon lord, and killing him at this stage would be a waste. However, the Lord decided to make a statement to all of them. He asked everyone to pay attention to him and waited until they did. The trapper said that now was not the time to talk to him because everyone was busy collecting coins and asked them to wait a minute. Meanwhile, the hunters were eagerly collecting every coin. Their attention and loyalty to the Lord grew rapidly. Denthalion apologized for the interruption, but reported some urgent information. So far, about 30 travelers and hunters had entered the dungeon. The boss was pleased with the information, because he felt excited about the competition with new people. His minions were embarrassed by this information, as they realized that they would end up in trouble. The Lord said that he had resorted to magic to find out about someone's entrances, but he did not expect such disclosures. Hearing this, the hunters were confused because they did not know how to deal with 30 rich people. The hunters wondered why there were so many of them and where they came from, realizing that 30 people could not defeat them. The hunters wanted to avoid a fight and asked the Lord if there was a detour instead of the main exit from the castle. In desperation, the Lord said that there was no other way out but to use the one they had come by. The hunters wondered what they should do in case of an attack in the place where they were. They are capable of not only destroying the treasure hunters, but also smashing this place in less than a minute, given that there are 30 of them. There was uncertainty in the air, and the soldiers, along with their leader, did not know what to do. But the Lord had a secret plan and was about to explain their actions. If they couldn't avoid a collision, they could attack. The treasure hunter's chief coldly accepted his answer, which might have some meaning. The Lord said that he had a map that could help with the situation. Unfortunately, his powers are not sufficient to indicate which side the attack will come from. They are able to act regardless of their location. One of the hunters asked himself what it all meant. The demon lord wondered whether people knew about magic and whether they could use it in military divisions. At the same time, he was sure that they would feel his magical power and find him. The map shows several tunnels leading to the exit. You can also choose different paths to get out of a difficult situation, while he, as a defender, will be engaged in strategy and hold back the enemy. The barefooted man realizes that he wants to sacrifice himself again. Although this behavior is not typical of a demon lord, he asks if the other man is not in shock and if he is going to go outside now. He also wonders if he's not bluffing about the criminals, as they may not even exist. The Lord is worried that his deception might be exposed and confusedly assures him that he would never do such a thing. His goal is only to help. You have had time to verify the truth of his words and partially believe me. It's up to the hunters to decide. Denthalion passes by the hunter. He is desperate and doesn't know what to do because of the huge risk. He realizes that Denthalion was not deceiving in his words and agrees to his proposal to act according to his strategy. The leader of the hunters forbade mentioning the plan because it would demoralize his team. He asked his team to stop collecting treasure and go outside. The demon lord watched carefully and realized that everything was going according to his plan. They trusted him, so nothing could go against him. He asked them not to doubt. The whole team left the Lord's temple through the huge arches of the dungeon. The demon lord was sitting on their shoulders, showing the way in the light of torches. One of the hunters noticed that perhaps their leader could already move on his own. He was not pleased because he had to save his strength. The hunter ordered his saucer to collect all the collectible coins and leave. The plan was to split into groups and exit together through the main exit. One of his men noticed that the plan was ridiculous and looked like nonsense. However, he ordered them to shut their mouths and listen to him, pointing to the map. You understand your location and see the roads leading to the exit, as well as the soldiers choosing one of 3 paths to leave the area. The 30 warriors are like a small army in a campaign. To survive, we must not engage them in combat at our level. In this situation, we have a chance to survive in this environment. The soldiers tensed up when they received this message because they realized that one of the brigades would be completely destroyed. The boss wants them to relax completely, as he is confident that at least 2 groups will survive, and with luck, perhaps no one will die. He will guard all the treasure from now on. His crew did not like this because they realized that he could take all the treasure for himself. He asked them to relax and assured them that he had no intention of taking them for himself. On the one hand, they unite in a group with the Demon Lord. This group with the Demon Lord will be blessed in the shelter, and if they survive, they will leave their treasures at the central exit and will undoubtedly become heroes. If the situation worsens, the consequences could be significant. The hunter took the treasures on his shoulder and walked forward. He greeted everyone. He smiled greedily and said, "Show me your gunpowder." They said among themselves that he wanted to die like a dog. One of them asked him what he thought about his family waiting for him and whether it would be dangerous for everyone. The boss emphasized that the situation was tense and causing anxiety and potential discontent within the team. The captain reiterated that everyone in the room must be involved in survival, as individual survival does not matter. These words strengthened the team's spirit among the brigade. They split into groups and went in different directions. One of the leaders of the boss walkers realized that he had fooled all these idiots. He realized that his strategy would not work if it was applied in only one place. During the conversation with the Demon Lord, they discussed that Denthalion did not escape, but they did not have enough time to discuss it, and if he realized it, he realized it. The Lord argued that there was enough time to determine if he was going to escape, emphasizing his seriousness. If he survived, all the treasures would be his, and he would be able to defend himself because he would have them. Therefore, if he acts for his own benefit and some people sacrifice with him, his share of the treasure will increase. This is always beneficial for the boss, regardless of the circumstances. Hearing the Demon Lord's words, the hunter agreed with them completely. He thought that getting to the top gave meaning to everything that had happened, and he didn't care about his people. But at that moment, the Lord realized that the commander of the hunters was foolish. He looks at the map and realizes where he is. He will realize his plan. When he noticed that the hunters had split into small groups, he decided to attack them one by one. He hired thugs, for whom he had already run out of money, and intends to kill them all. The dungeon began to shake violently. An earthquake could have covered the dungeon and everyone there with stones. The hunter asked if the shaking he felt was an attack by the invaders. Everyone was shocked by the situation. The hunter standing next to him could feel the ground shaking, and he and his fellow hunters tried to understand why the ground was shaking so much. Suddenly they saw magical effects. The wind blew away the burning shards, the lights of which went out. The torches fell to the ground and no one could see anything. This man, who was always asking questions, asked the Lord what was happening and what was going to happen here. The Lord covered his mouth with his hands. He advised him not to move and to remain quiet, if he wants to live longer than his friends. The Lord pulls out a sword from his inventory. He thanked the hunter and said he would always be grateful to him. The hunters had tears in their eyes, but the demonic Lord pierced him with his sword, taking his life. At that moment, The group of hunters were watching the icon that appeared on the ground in front of them, so they did not see what was happening behind them. As if mesmerized, they stared ahead and did not understand what was happening, because they had never seen anything like it before. A pink icon appeared on the spot, radiating enormous energy. Along with it, stones began to fall off, and someone began to crawl out of the icon. When the hunters saw something incredible emerge from the inferno, they were amazed. A stone goblin appeared in front of them, radiating deadly energy. Not only did it appear before them, but it began to attack. A figure appeared in front of them, and they frightened each other with questions. The big goblin began to destroy everything in the dungeon, throwing down bulky stones which frightened the people there. They screamed in fear, but no one heard them. The stone monster destroyed the dungeon with its powerful blows, falling on the hunters one by one, and with each blow everything was plunged into smoke, as a result of which nothing could be seen. One of the treasure hunters, covering his mouth from the dust, noticed something in the dispersing smoke. He was frightened by the thought of his partner's death, who had been crushed to death by the stone goblin. The stone goblin remained in place and raised his stone arm, causing the hunters to scream in pain. He decided to engage in battle, drawing his sword to stop the enemy. The stone goblin broke his sword in half with one movement. He was horrified to realize that his sword, his instrument of defense, was broken, and the stone monster was striking right at him. He realized that the situation was bad, but he was powerless to change anything. The stone goblin hit him so hard that he was completely destroyed, leaving no trace. One of the hunters is paralyzed with fear and cannot move. He noticed a pool of blood left behind by his partner. He can't run away because he realizes that he can't go back, so he stands still out of fear. Lord Intalion approached the hunter from behind, and the latter did not realize whose hand it was. He asked what was happening and whether they could get away from all the events as quickly as possible. The Lord came up behind him without saying a word. He pierced the hunter's body with a cold sword. He paid him for his lunch, which the hunter did not expect, trusting the Lord. The failed treasure hunter falls dead to the ground. The Lord smiles and asks why everyone is so serious. He points to himself and asks if anyone knows who he is. The Demon Lord, that's what I am. We return to the second group, which is unsuspectingly moving through the dungeon. They heard an echo coming from the tunnel and began to wonder if a battle had begun, and if the information from the Demon Lord was true. The bald warrior said that the Demon Lord had inadvertently done a useful job for us. The appearance of the Lord Intalion suddenly stopped the travelers. They asked themselves why he is here and why he is standing in front of them. The Lord feels well and stands confidently in front of them. The chief hunter was glad to see him. He asked if he had run away, keeping his word, and wondered where everyone else was. At that moment, the Lord pulls out a bloody knife and says that his friends have followed him. Denthalion said, "And you will become one of them. You must die confidently holding a dagger." The hunter was seriously disturbed by this statement, and, being here, he said that it was not funny at all and that he should stop going around the cottage. Lor, holding a dagger, came over to him, taking a drop of blood on his finger, and said to one of the hunters, "Okay, I'll take that into consideration and think about whether to accept your offer. But before that, I will probably kill you all." After these words, the travelers were frightened, and with a trembling voice, one of them asked to repeat himself, because perhaps he had heard wrong. Against the backdrop of the destroyed temple, these fools did not understand the Lord at all. He emphasizes the need to look around so that they can see their faces at the moment he kills them. The boss of the treasure hunters called him a scoundrel. The latter's face was so tense as if it might explode, and then he said they were starting right now. The system told the Lord that love for him had dropped to 0 and everyone was very angry with him. The Lord took his sword and expressed his joy at the others' ineptitude, saying that he couldn't wait to confront everyone with a fait accompli. Did they really think the Demon Lord could be on their side? After saying this, the treasure hunter felt that the others had fallen for his ruse like mere spoons. They hated him and said many insults to him. They decided to kill the Lord at any cost as their main goal. They rushed to attack him, armed with swords, sticks, and maces to strike. In the darkness behind the Demon Lord, the goblin's great longing to meet them awakened. His gaze was directed at them. In his eyes, he saw his victim. As soon as they approached, he smashed them to pieces with a huge blow. After the impact, fragments of slabs and stones filled the dungeon, and a bloody hand could be seen sticking out from under the rubble. The second traveler was crushed against the wall. The stone goblin began to look closely at the remaining travelers. They were terrified, realizing that they could not cope with such a fight. The stone monster almost completely destroyed the team, leaving only one of the leaders, who idly watched the carnage in the dungeon. He notices that the situation is stacked against him. The bald team member with the big sledgehammer survived and decided to attack the stone goblin. He hits the stone monster hard. He breaks it into pieces, scattering them around. He is happy and tells his boss that he has done it. The moment the boss sees his life running away, The demon lord, out of zeal, decides to pierce him with his sword. Dantalion notes that he is left alone and is grateful to the one who allowed him to become a real donkey. The hunter's boss didn't like his words, and he shouted but suddenly noticed something. The stone goblin, which had recently been smashed, rose from the stones and stood next to Dantalion. Why did he realize that he did not choose this fight? The Lord says that it is easy to kill a goblin by destroying its stone shield. Long-term effectiveness requires knowledge and experience, and even with the training to face the great defender, it would not have been easy. If they hadn't split up and gone in different groups, they would have won the battle. After the victory, feeling a surge of strength and energy, he asked his boss about his next plans. He was horrified to realize that he was in trouble, and felt that he had completely changed from what he had been before. He was now a demon lord. He personified great power and danger. He could not predict the outcome of events and thought out a survival strategy in detail, which gave him an advantage. The hunter realized that this move was successful and effective. He threw his sword to the ground. On his knees, he asked the Lord to kill him. Dantalion holds a blood sword in his hands and says that he understands his interlocutor. He slowly approached the kneeling hunter. He tilted his head, waiting for the Lord to approach him. However, the hunter was more cunning and thought the Lord was an idiot, thinking that he could get closer to him through this maneuver. At this point, they will find out who will defeat whom, and the Lord has to die because the hunter had a secret trump card, a small dagger hidden behind his back. The Lord, walking forward, looked at the message from the system. The message told him that he could hire more monsters. His balance was restored and he had 100 librons. The Lord approached the hunter, waiting for him to get closer. He can kill him because he has a knife hidden in his sleeve. He counted the seconds and steps of the approaching Lord. He was waiting for the moment when he would kill him. However, the Lord, holding his sword, stopped and stood, not coming any closer. The hunter was sweating hard, asking himself why he stopped. The Lord stopped and said, "That big ass. I know your intentions and realize that you are hiding a knife." He laughs loudly at him, waving his sword and telling him, "It's time to put an end to your cowardice." Called a coward, the hunter took the oath. He was angry, his eyes flashed with rage. He couldn't stand being called a coward, couldn't accept this end. He pulls out a hidden dagger and angrily rushes at the Lord. He screams and runs toward him extremely fast. By the time he reaches him, he falls, missing, because the Lord disappears. He was behind him. It was not the Lord, it was just a slug. The hunter wondered why there was a slug on his foot. The hunter stopped and fell to the ground as the Lord approached him. The hunter tried to strike the Dantalion. The stone goblin grabbed the swinging hand and blocked the blow. Great pain gripped his body as the goblin crushed his arm. Dantalion looks at the system window and realizes that everything is happening exactly as he planned. He had enough money to hire a slug. He did not believe that the slug would help him, but it stopped his enemy. The Lord smiled and asked, "How do you feel?" He dramatically pulled out his sword and asked how his opponent felt when everything around him was falling apart and things were not going according to plan, and whether he felt poor and unhappy at such moments. However, despite his feelings, the Lord is still disturbed by something. The hunter, filled with fear, realized that he could only die wondering what he had done wrong. He asked himself if it was right to leave the Lord alive at that moment. Why didn't they kill him? If they had stopped, everything could have been different. It all started from the moment they received the treasure map from that woman. Even before that, it was about agreeing to the demon lord's lies. He would not be able to resist because he was facing a real demon lord, a cold, ruthless, and great strategist. After a certain point, the whole environment was filled with white smoke, and the hero got confused, not realizing where he was. He saw his father, who said that his son's task was not yet complete. The boy asked again what he wanted, and his father replied that the choice did not matter. His life would be bad without his father. After receiving the answer, the hero tried to dispel the intrusive white fog and the voice in his head, asking him to be quiet. He suddenly heard a voice calling him and woke up, opening his eyes sharply. A beautiful girl was standing in front of him, who looked at him and said that he was finally awake. He woke up in a large, comfortable room and asked what was going on. She reminded him that he hadn't been able to get up earlier. Then she bandaged his chest. He realizes that the pieces of Libron he had donated 2 months ago, as well as the 96 Libron he had paid for the date, were picked out of the water. She hopes that he will work on the project for one more day, because there were only 196 Librons. The Lord was confused about the devilishness of the woman's wishes. 3 weeks ago, he became a Dantalion. He woke up in the body of a rank 71 lord in the dungeon attack game world. After that, a group of treasure hunters surrounded him with the intention of killing him. As the dungeon manager, he destroyed all the restraints. He recalls falling to the ground. Exhausted after a hard battle, he leaned on a stone goblin. He realized that it was finally over, and he had survived. When he looked at the system's tutorial, he found out that his level had increased. He realized that he had defeated the enemies and become stronger when he saw the sword sticking out of the hunter's hand. The system informed him that he had gained access to learning entry-level skills by clearing the tutorial, and new characters were available to him. It can use the acquired skills directly in battle. In the future, there will be no time to move so slowly, and he realizes that he has only completed the first level. However, after waiting a minute, he realizes that his story has just begun. If you don't want to think about it, it's in case he strives to reach levels similar to Dentalion. He realizes that he can return to his world only at the end of the game and has no choice but to move forward. But to do so, he needs to choose the right skill. In this situation, one solution is better than the other, so he has to think. The system has provided an important skill, the S-Class Apostle and Aphrodite. The player can choose the desired training topic. This skill allows you to get not only a higher status but also a special view of things. He also learns the general understanding and reading of other skills, realizing that it is really useful. He should continue playing after that. However, as I look around, I notice a landscape of devastation. He is aware of his fatigue. He is exhausted from the hard battle. His enemies lay fallen all around him. He must recover in a day or a night. He asks the stone goblin if he can use his arms as a bed. He falls asleep on his arms, feeling protected. Then he realized that he woke up in his bed, in a broken house where everything was in disarray. The golem brought him to a room that resembled a dentist's office. He hoped it was just a dream. He was still in captivity as a Dentalion. His memory is gone, and now he lives again as a demon lord. He stares thoughtfully out the window, realizing that a new catastrophe has occurred despite his alarm. At that moment, a girl approaches him. He turned to her and told her what had happened. The girl approached him with a look as cold as permafrost and said that she had come immediately. Her name was Lepis Lazuli. Dentalion noted that a lot of time and money was spent on the maintenance of this girl. She apologized for her rudeness, saying that she had difficulty understanding his words. 2 months ago, she joined him, and it was the Chamber of Commerce and Industry that provided him with the loan. As proof, the girl presents a document that testifies to the promise mentioned in it. The Lord realizes that the joke doesn't work on her and that they have been repeating it all week in vain. Previously, he was robbed by bandits and now by creditors. The Lord realized that the world around him was disappointing. Dentalion wondered why he had to solve the problems and clean up the mess left by the previous Lord. She interrupted his monologue and called everyone idiots for lending money to such a person. He got really angry at what the girl said and told her he wanted to ask her a few questions. She said no problem. The first question concerned the consequences for the Lord if the money was not returned. She advised him to declare bankruptcy first. The answer to the question was incomplete, so he continued to find out what would happen if he declared bankruptcy. She explained that if that happened, the Chamber of Commerce would take ownership of the Demon Lord's castle and have the right to sell it. In addition, they could make small requests. She asked him if he had considered such consequences when he took the money, adding that actions are easier than words. The Lord had only one question for the girl, which confused her as she hadn't understood much during the day. Meanwhile, she was kneeling before a powerful demon lord who exuded an aura of power. She still could not understand him, and she said so. "I did not understand you." He asked her rudely about the date, and she apologized for her rudeness, saying that it was April 17th, 1505. He laughed, saying that in 6 days he had to make another loan payment, and if the situation did not change, he would have to declare bankruptcy. He continued to laugh, adding that he was finally starting to realize something. The laughter frightened the girl in front of the guy. She did not understand the reason for his behavior. The Lord offered her a loan of 10,000 librons from a trade organization, which was a huge sum. We move on to a scene where eagles are circling the castle, which is the headquarters of the Kenchushka company. A little goblin runs along the corridor, knocking down everyone on his way. He is very busy, running and writing something in his notebook, hurrying to the headquarters of the company called Stingy Goblin Torkel. The goblin hurriedly took an urgent document to the Batavia port. In the game, the process was moving along smoothly, but time was running out, and so it was important to make sure that everything was prepared for a timely launch. The clock warned that time was running out, and it was worrying. Managers were called to an emergency meeting because of an emergency meeting, but no one knew what was happening in the area. Someone was late for the meeting, apologizing for being late. The mysterious guests at the candlelit table greet him, hiding their faces, and an old man, looking like Count Dracula, sits at the main seat and remarks, "You're late, Turkel." He clasped his hands and said, "For us traders, time is money. So guys, let's sit down quickly. We have no time to waste. Let's start the meeting." And so begins Chapter 10. If you liked the video, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. The Kenchushka firm is the headquarters of the 5th-ranked demon lords, including Melbus and Paimon, as well as their bodyguards, who are considered the best demons in the world. One of them runs an organization that is a vampire academy in the demon world, and his name is Ivan Lobrock. He has called an urgent meeting for a girl named Lappy to explain to everyone the reason for this. A girl we knew, whom we saw with the head, agreed with Ivan the Great. In the places of honor, the admiring lizard demons and mouse demons are sitting in admiring seats looking at her. They do not congratulate or rejoice because she is not a hybrid, but a mix of succubus and human. They wonder why she is at this exclusive meeting, because she is not of their kind. They resent her presence and ask themselves why she is here. Lord Ivan Lobrock could not stand the mockery and, not being given the opportunity to speak, angrily ordered the audience to shut up, burning with anger. The goblin, seeing his master's reaction, almost turned pale. Everyone fell silent, and the lord asked the girl to continue. She replied that Denthalion, a 71 Sate-ranked demon lord, had requested a loan. One of the goblins interrupted the girl, saying that everyone was gathered because of a rogue. The goblin notes that the situation on Earth is serious, and they need to talk about it, despite the fact that the girl laughs at them. The lord replies that Turkle will calm down now. They will discuss his request. The girl says that the lord is asking for 10,000 librons. This information shocked the orc sitting opposite. The Turk jumped at her words and asked what she had just said. 10,000 librons? That amount could be the entire national budget for a small country. Did he really ask for that much money? The girl continued, saying that he had. She said that when she was on her knees in front of him, she asked him if he really decided to make such a big request. He asked if she had heard him well, saying that he wanted to borrow 10,000 librons. She didn't emphasize it, but it should be understood that his credit trust only allows him to borrow 196 armored vehicles. He sat confidently on the throne and said he wanted to borrow much more. But you're exaggerating, she says. I don't even know what to tell you now. The Lord suggests not to start a conversation and asks why not lend him a significant amount of money for this purpose. The demonic lord and Dentalion, considered incompetent in this world, sits on the throne and says that she does not know what to say. However, she cannot even think about it. This is indeed that Talion, and you don't even have the right to think about it. I am ready to return this money to you from where I am now. Do you want to bankrupt him and push his firm off the top? He approached the girl standing at her side. He asks her for the truth. Are you not mistaken in your judgment? She answered with a trembling voice. No, not in this case. He asked her to give him a question and immediately a second answer. You came here on the orders of the company, so lend me the money. It will help me solve many problems. But she replied that she did not have her own access. The Lord says that it's all about the mask and finds the woman's words very interesting, but emphasizes the importance of getting back to the main idea. The company has no reason to lend him money. It doesn't really matter. He was ready to spend his whole life faithfully serving it. It has to give him 10,000 librons and then pay him back. That's not a bad deal, is it? The woman wondered why this deal would be good for him if he lost his status as a demon lord. He is convinced that he will be the company's loyal dog for the rest of his life, and has no doubts about it. He takes her by the chin and tells her he knows it la. He looks her straight in the eye and asks if she will come with him, but doesn't say what he is going to do. She pulls his hand away from her chin. She looks him sternly in the eye and tells him that he is a scoundrel and that she understands him very well. She is now in the Senate and asks for 10,000 librons, but he cannot pay even 100. So the goblin replied that this is a refusal of her request. Ivan Lord says that you have a good point, but asks for more information. She agreed with the Lord and continued. If you don't have any questions, you can just share your hobbies. Denthalion seems to have lost his mind and wants to return to this world with new strength, believing that he can do something better for himself. He is going to do it for the sake of his beloved. The goblin does not understand the hint of a loved one and is confused as to what it means. It's because I, Lord Denthalion, am experiencing brain stress. The Senate reacted with concern to this answer. The horrible woman must be a demon lord. She replied that he had promised her 1 thallion and would do everything to make her his wife. Reacting with anger to the woman's offer, the son indignantly asked who allowed this lower caste person to do this. He ordered her to be thrown out, calling her insulting names. The Lord offered to hire a dog for the company, asking who would not be willing to do this nice thing. He laughed out loud, expressing confidence that his plan to have a loyal dog serve the company for the rest of his life would be a success. What did they think of that? Why not create a successful human hybrid? He asked. The goblin not only becomes part of the great trading company in the demon world, but also completely changes her fate, her reputation as a destroyer, and even receives honor. She becomes the wife of a demon lord. Lord Couch continues to laugh, saying that this may not be art, because even the Lord is not sure. He notes that the Kentucky company likes to bring in puppets, and they won't give more money to the incompetent Lord Denthalion. It's a special loan made especially for him, and the girls are clamoring for it with tears. He will return to the demonic castle, borrow the money, and receive 10,000 librons. which will provide him with what he wants. However, this will be his undoing, because he will not have a chance to escape from this state.